I'm going to draw from a few life experiences and then offer a little bit of advice. Advice which I think will help us navigate and make sense of these difficult times. The first experience was that earlier in this incarnation, before I was profoundly on my spiritual path, I worked for a medium sized company. And that company had, for the most part, a singular owner. That owner happened to be one of the wealthiest men on the planet. At the time of the sale of the company, which was just around the time which I departed, there were only a few hundred people with greater wealth than the owner of this company. And I remember many people saying how bizarre it was that such a wealthy man, such a multi-billionaire could exist and nobody would know anything about him. He had a love of money, but he had no desire to be seen. He had no interest to be in the public eye. And as a result, he was very discreet. And I remember thinking, wow, how unusual for such a man to get to be so powerful and wealthy, and yet have no interest to be seen. It didn't dawn on me until a number of years later that he's not alone. That there are many people who either have money and or power that you know nothing about. And I found that really fascinating because as the world continued to unfold in ways that seemed perplexing to me, I couldn't make sense of it by the headlines, and I certainly couldn't make sense of it by the actions of those who we had trusted to serve our better interest. It wasn't until I started to realize, started to believe that there was another layer, of power which sat above the layer that we were familiar with, that was largely responsible for the actions, the geopolitical, the global affairs that we were experiencing, and was actively dictating not just the events themselves, but the response from areas of our sphere of influence, such as the media, politicians, social media, big tech, large corporations, and so on and so forth. That the power concentration wielded such tremendous influence as to set a narrative that humanity was otherwise entirely compelled by. The second experience that I'm going to draw from is that about a year after I had left my company, I'd made a declaration on one evening that I was devoted entirely to the divine creation. And I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know where this was going to bring me. I simply knew that I was disconnecting from the reality that had served me for the first half of the incarnation. And I was suffering. I was suffering with a lack of attachment to the practical world, a shortage of purpose, and otherwise seeking greater meaning. And I remember on a particularly vulnerable evening, I just made a strong declaration for whatever the divine will would be, to let that will be done. And my life ended up unfolding in unexpected ways. And about a year later, I was going through a particularly difficult period of sleep insomnia, where I would be woken each morning between 3 and 4 a.m. And weary-eyed, I would make my way to the kitchen table, and I was reading the Law of One at the time, and I would sit through a different session. I would try to get through one session each morning, drinking a cup of tea, and usually fatiguing enough to then go back to bed. And this was on a repeat loop. No matter what time I went to bed, no matter how much exercise I got, no matter what factors I tried to control for, inevitably 3 to 4 a.m., that witching hour, something would pull me out of bed, and I would find myself at the kitchen table one night to the next. And one night while I was sitting there, I was closing my eyes, trying to feel into the evening hours, a bit too tired to even read. And I started to have visions. In my mind's eye, I started to see different areas of my life, the places I had been, cities in which I had lived, and they were all strung together. A sequencing of events dating back years and years were being shown to me. And as a result of them being shown to me, I got this beautiful feeling that I was never alone. That each of those moments of my life had been perfectly orchestrated to guide me from one major event to the next. And that all of those events had brought me right there to that moment, sitting at that kitchen table in the darkness of London, reading that book, drinking my tea by myself one night to the next. And that it was no coincidence that I was exactly where I was intended to be, and that the path that I had no idea had been laid out before me, I had been walking it all this time. I knew that I wasn't alone. And as the months have passed since that fruitful evening, I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that not only am I not alone, but none of us are intended to ever feel alone. Something has gone terribly off track with humanity, where we feel as if we come in here knowing nothing and have no way of figuring out where to go and what to do next. And all the while, we feel that we're alone in that unknowing. And the truth is that that could not be more wrong. You're not alone. You've never been alone. You may not be vibrating correctly to align with the intention that is pulling at you. You may not be calling for help so that you can actively receive the messages intended for you. But you've never been alone, and Spirit has been with you each moment of the day. We feel that Spirit is above us. It's not. Spirit is all around us, working in different dimensions in different ways, trying to influence our choices, trying to guide us down the right path. Sometimes we're aligned. Sometimes we're out of alignment. Sometimes our suffering is so great that it slingshots us back in the other direction, which is the mechanism for us to find alignment. It's all part of a deliberate plan for you to fulfill your mission and to accelerate down the path chosen prior to your arrival. And that morning, I had perfect and complete confirmation that that had been happening to me. And I never would have dreamed that that was the case. On top of seeing those different events unfold in my mind's eye, I also had this beautiful feeling of calm wash over me. This incredible, relaxed sense of self, knowing that it was okay. Everything was going to be okay. And that stayed with me since. It's not all the time. There's certainly moments that I question my direction. I think it's healthy to be in a state of perpetual improvement, taking responsibility for your choices at all opportunities. But I don't shy away from calling for help. And the moments that I feel that the help is furthest away, I start to go into gratitude and I start to express all the things that I'm grateful for. And with enough gratitude, my vibration moves high enough that the alignment returns to me. And once again, I know that I'm not alone. It's right there. And I feel it pulling at me all the time. Why are these two life events, why am I bringing them into your space? And why do I feel they're relevant? For starters, as you're watching the events unfold on this planet, keep in mind that anybody who you know about, any of the personalities that are on television or are running charities of some sort that have a global footprint, right? Or certainly some of the CEOs of these companies that tell you that they've developed products that are in your best interest, they are at the lowest possible rung on the totem pole. The real powers you'll never know about. They have been here for a very long time and influencing humanity in ways that we have no knowing of. And part of the plan is to ensure that you stay completely asleep to their existence so that their power is left intact and unchallenged. The moment humanity wakes up to this realization that the people that you feel are elected to represent you are simply taking orders from another power center, is the day that the rebellion starts and we no longer tolerate it and no longer give them our power. And so to prevent that from happening, this force has been behind the scenes for a very long time. Every so often, this force mobilizes and attempts to exert more control. because to remain in power requires great control. And those that challenge their authority, whether directly or unknowingly, often will be cut down or certainly disappear. The system has been in place and has been operating for them from their perspective successfully for a very long time. The problem now is that the planet is moving forward into a new level of consciousness. And the vibration of the planetary sphere is wonderfully conducive to the awakening. And as a result, that force needs to exert even more power than usual to prevent you from waking up, to ensure that you remain asleep. And they've tried that with different tactics. The most important is fear, because fear cuts off your source connection, lowers your vibration, and otherwise keeps you from making good decisions as you make bad decisions, and prevents your intuition from properly guiding you into the knowing, into the proper awareness of what's unfolding. But fear is just one of the mechanisms, right? Chemicals are of a very low vibration. And many of the foods that you've been consuming have been designed deliberately to lower your vibration. So too are things that I can't actually say, or else this video ends up disappearing, as other videos have. And so you get the sense of it, and some people took it into their body once and twice and 3 times, and if you don't succeed 3 times, maybe you did it 4 times. I heard of some places that were doing it 5 times. That all has ulterior motives than what's being broadcast, because it's coming through the same power center that I'm speaking of. And the power center does not like you. It does not like you at all. And actually, it desires most of you to depart. You are either seen as a laborer in the eyes of this power center, or you are seen as an unnecessary eater or a polluter, or you are seen as otherwise somebody who is interfering with their plans. However you see it, if they don't have full control over you, you don't have a reason to exist in their eyes. The other part of the personal story that I told you about was the confirmation that you're not alone. And right now, more than ever, there is nobody coming to save you or to save humanity. We're going to have to do it ourselves. But we're not alone in that endeavor. There is an incredible positive force that is loving and supportive of the planetary sphere that desires a successful outcome for that which we seek. And by focusing on your vibration and ensuring that your days are joyous, that you're living through your heart, that you're not always perfect, certainly, you make mistakes, but that you take responsibility for those mistakes and you see it as an opportunity to grow. That you put the egoic mind aside and live in a state of compassion and understanding for self and other self. This is the journey back to the Creator. This is the vibration that allows for your source connection to lock on to you and pull you into a safe harbor and guide you and deliver a knowing. And I can tell you that I talk to people all the time, and some of them have been getting these weird senses that they have to move to a more rural or agricultural environment. Many of my spiritually minded friends have been called out of major cities over the last couple of years. Many of them have, for the first time in their life, started to hide cash in their homes. Some of them have bought gold coins. Some of them have navigated the complexity of cryptocurrency and for the first time ended up buying cryptocurrency. They've all been guided in their own way. I know a number of people who have bought seeds, many people who have turned their small little gardens or their backyards into actual sources of food. It all depends on your location and the instructions and what is coming through for you. But I can tell you that with alignment comes the knowing, and that knowing, that guidance is intended for your safety and to give you the best possibility of navigating these difficult times successfully. Okay? In the event that you don't feel that pulling, that your journey has yet to bring you to a place where knowing what to do each and every day has grown more and more clear for you, then the best thing that I can recommend at this point is start a gratitude journal where each day, whether it's when you wake or when you go to bed, write 2 or 3 things down that you're incredibly grateful for. Just a gratitude, not to complain, not to bring up the things that are wrong or what you need to be changed, but the things that are right. The vibration of gratitude and humility are the highest vibrational energies for alignment. They're the quickest way into the alignment space. The other thing that's super important is find joy. Your day has to include something joyous. And I'm not talking about something on a screen that's mind-numbing or otherwise sometimes addicting. I'm talking about a cup of coffee with a friend, or a nice stroll through a park, or getting into a really good book, or picking up a new skill. If you're lucky enough to have some green area in or around your home, maybe try your hand at a small little garden. If you live in an apartment, have you considered growing microgreens or herbs or perhaps sprouts? There's so many different things that can be so tranquil and wonderfully joyous, and they're all available to you. And with that, the combination of humility and gratitude each day, combined with a degree of joy each and every day, you'll be surprised at how the knowing, the intuition, the guidance can start to come online. Without that guidance, we're all flying blind. It's going to be so hard to navigate as these events that are intended to unfold start to pick up steam and unfold. Because they're going to, right? People remember that the narrative for the last 2 years was a singular focus. And then on a dime, all of a sudden, it switched directions and it went to a new crisis. We didn't even get a break. We just went from one crisis to the next. And all of a sudden, the whole narrative switched over and everyone's debating the whole narrative. And all the while, it's all entirely manicured. It's all entirely planned. That layer that I was speaking of doesn't just desire the war to be the war that we're witnessing. It desires that war to spill over. It desires that war to bring superpowers into conflict. And it desires that conflict to lead to all sorts of disruptions. Disruptions in communication, disruptions in the financial system. And with those severe disruptions, it creates an atmosphere that same power can introduce some other type of mechanism that locks into your body, that is promoted as in your best interest and for your safety and security, and can then be used for greater control. Because that force has a big problem. It's dying. And it has been for some time. And that death event is accelerating for that force. And if that force is not successful in properly controlling humanity and arresting the ascension, that force, which does not belong here, will vanish. And it is very much aware of it. Part of why it's grown so conspicuous over these last few years is because it's pushing into a state of desperation for its own survival. And it knows that this is end game. It does not care about the legal consequences that are long-term. It does not care about the economic consequences that are long-term. It doesn't even care if people end up figuring it out over the long term. It needs to exert itself now. And if it's unsuccessful over these next few years in exerting itself, which it ultimately will be, it will vanish and humanity will move forward in its ways. The problem is that this force is powerful and in a position of control and authority, and as a result, it will do great, great damage on its way out. And it would rather see all of us perish than for humanity to move into a higher vibrational, loving space and take back over the planet and actually govern in a way that is from the heart and not from a place of ego, manipulation, and control. Okay? So this is the discussion that I wanted to bring forth to you. I know my role, and I can tell you that it's actually has nothing to do with these videos. I simply share them from time to time because I feel an inclination to bring forth what I believe to be true. And these messages will resonate with some of you, and for those that it doesn't, that's okay. That's okay. Everybody is on their own path. And so take away what feels right. Call for help, seek the guidance, and allow that source connection to come along stronger and stronger and move you through these challenging times. Because I assure you, the events of the last few years are just the beginning. They're just the beginning. What's unfolding now is the next major phase, and it's intended to grow pretty intense. Pretty intense. My screen just flashed there. It was a funny moment. And so that's all I have. I'm going to allow it to end there. I just noticed we're past 20 minutes. I usually try to keep these videos short. But I send you much love and a great deal of light. And I wish you all safe passage onto the next stage in this journey, because the future timeline is beautiful. It's beautiful. And for those of us fortunate enough to arrive there, the new earth will be born from our struggles, our determination, and our ability to come together as an awakened people, operating through the heart, actively caring and taking the time to live through our compassionate selves, preserving the needs of each other, and expanding into the love heart space for one another, breaking from the enslavement that has carried us to this moment. Okay? And love and light, everyone. We'll speak again real soon.